Tanya Marie Dubé, welcome to the Uncivilized podcast. For those of you listening, this is a little behind the scenes podcast action. We get real close to saying the thing that we really want to say when we record. And then if you have an experienced podcaster, they're like, wait, let's hit record and dive into it. And we almost just had that moment where I was like, we could just start talking right now. Wait. Let's hit record. So welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you. Please tell the audience one thing about you that's not on your bio.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to do this. This is going to be a great call, a great conversation. One thing about me that's not on my bio, I've been an actor since I was 5 years old,
No
and
kidding.
it's something that I'm super passionate about. I'm also a writer.
Amazing.
Yeah, but actor first.
Do you live in LA?
I do not live in LA. I live in British Columbia.
You do.
hmm
What's the acting scene like in BC?
Well, I was just getting back into it. I mean, I did theater my whole life, and then I did film in Toronto. I did film work there.
Okay.
And then coming here, we just moved here. My son and I just moved back to Victoria, British Columbia. And I was
Beautiful.
like, I want to get back into acting again. It's time now. He's 15 years old, like it's time. I can't stop thinking about this thing, that I love so much. It brings me so much joy. And, of course, doing my own identity work around what I do is, I do it on me first. But I've been doing it on me my whole entire life. But yeah, I just started calling around to all the theaters and I was like, this is my name. This is who I am. This is what I do. I'm super excited. I want to audition for you. And then, as the law of attraction would have it, sure enough, a director got a hold of me and she's like, this theater owner gave me your name. I'm looking for a really strong actor. Can you do an audition? And I was like, I got you. And then I got the part of the play. So I'm so
Congratulations. Good.
Thank
I hope everyone who just heard Law of Attraction also heard I made a bunch of phone calls and I did a little bit of elbow grease as opposed to I sat in my bathtub and just manifested. Tanya, can you share with the audience, you dropped a term for me earlier that I would love for you to tease apart.
Okay.
And I think it's the core of some of your work, and that term is survival identity. What does that mean to you and what should it mean to the person listening?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So well, let me start. Okay. So can I just start with like how I got to this work?
Yeah,
So
please.
I was born into the foster care system and I literally was in 7 homes before I was 2. And then I was in the 8th home from 2 until 10. And my mom was like the fun aunt. She used to take me to, like, this is in the 70s and the early 80s. She used to take me to bars and clubs all the time. And, I was always a little performer anyway. So I was always making people laugh and not really understanding the weight of what was really happening around me. But when she got married, she married a pedophile who was also physically and emotionally and verbally and mentally abusive. And, I lived with them for 2 years. And, upon a horrible, another day in my life, which was a horrible beating, I ended up running away at 12 years old and I had $18 saved. So I managed to grab that money and I started living on and off the streets from 12 to 18 years old, just trying to finish school. I was a straight A student. I loved education. It was my dream to go to university, which I thought would never happen, and so yeah, at 16 years old, I ended up, leaving high school. My guidance counselor didn't want me to do that, but I had to because I was physically too big now to be sneaking around and hiding in places, trying not to get caught, just looking for a roof over my head, basically. But so through, all of this, I started to study psychology at 17. And then funny enough, I would meet someone at the bus stop, or on the transit in, the streetcar or whatever, who would need something from me. And I would have just learned about it that morning. And so I was able to start giving people real world advice. Now, people had been coming to me, sharing their stories with me since I was like 7. And I'm talking about adults, like unloading like their life circumstances on me, and I could never say anything. So for me to have this now body of information that I could share and give people actual like advice that I thought, this is it, now I can help people with this, I started to attract people coming to me left, right, and center, talking to me about all of these things, and I had ways to help direct, and it brought me so much joy. I was just like, this is really cool. So I did end up going back to school. I finished my high school diploma and I went to university and I studied psychology. And I was like, but I don't want to be a psychologist though. Like there's too many barriers. For me, what I love is being able to talk like this and to share experiences and help people work through problems. And so I didn't even think life coaching could be an option. Like I just didn't even know. So I just did it anyway. And I just like would charge like, well, whatever someone could exchange or whatever. I just didn't even think of getting paid for it. But anyhow, so to answer your question, when I left, I was in an 18-year relationship that was really toxic, and I lost myself inside of all of that, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had taken my 2 children and I left, and I had to figure it out. And so I started helping women going through the same kind of relationship I was in, and what they could do to rebuild their lives after this kind of emotional and psychological manipulation, and put the pieces back together. And then I started to see, we all have this thing in common where we all grew up in a world where our immediate sense of safety was completely threatened. Like there was no happiness, no real peace. Like there was always something looming. So we became the people, who were always checking the temperature of everybody else in the room before we didn't even matter. We just needed to know we were safe. We're always, when you enter a building, looking for the exit sign so you know exactly how to get out fast, or, learning how to become an island, which was me, doing everything by myself. Also learning that, I got to control the perception of me, and I think because I grew up in foster care and, I was a homeless street kid for so long, when people would hear that about me, they would shut down from me immediately. So I learned not to talk about these things. So when I started this online business 10 years ago and someone said, you're going to have to talk about all of that stuff, I was like, I'd rather die. I would rather full on die than do that, because I had protected myself for so long. So I started to unravel the survival identity so that I could make, have the impact that I wanted to have, but I didn't know that was going to happen yet. I thought I was doing it just for me. And then as life would have it, people were writing into me, like by email and saying, your story changed my life, or I didn't even know that I could think that way. And holy shit, you've been through so much. Like, how did you do that? And so I started to see that other people also wanted to start to unravel this survival identity. So I discovered in my work 5 core survival identities that we can all fall into easily. And I think that by the time we get to our 40s and our 50s and we're hitting, burnout and overwhelm and identity lag and disconnect and emptiness, despite all the success we've built, like, what is that? What is that thing that's happening right there? And I really do believe it's like that survival identity is like hanging on by a thread, but you're kicking and screaming, trying to hold on to it because it's worked for you for so long, but you're unfulfilled. So for me, I don't know, it feels to me like it's the key to why, if you're buying tons of courses online and tons of programs and it's still not clicking, something's not really working, it's because you're still leading with the mask. And when we're leading with that mask, that survival identity, we're attracting all kinds of things to the version of us that's not us. So it's not landing and it's not working anymore because it's time for that identity death. So that to me is what survival identity actually is. And it's such a deep rooted thing. And it's so terrifying to actually face until you're just like, nothing else is working. I'm ready to blow my entire life up. Like, what is going on? So that's where I work. That's what I do.
Beautiful. Thank you. There's a lot in there.
Yeah.
I would love just to take a quick backtrack.
Okay.
You left the house at 12 with $18. Is that correct? Do I have my numbers right?
Yep.
What do you draw upon as a 12-year-old to continue given those circumstances?
To continue my life?
Yeah, to not just collapse or fall apart or become an addict or...
Well, I had a moment. So I was 12 years old, and I had been living with, I immediately, that day when I left that house, my mother chased me down the street, like with the intention to catch me and kill me. So my little legs went as fast as I could possibly get myself as far away from her as possible. And so I ran all the way to my school, and there was a bus shelter there that was an enclosed one. And I just hid underneath the bench and I could see her car driving by. So I was just in terror, total survival mode. And I ran across the street to the lady's house. I was a school crosswalk guard. And so I ran over to her house, and so she knew me, but I was covered in blood and it was awful. And so I immediately called my best friend at the time, and I lived with her and her family for a while. And then that started to unravel as I was becoming close to her mom, that started to fall apart. So I did have this moment behind a church. I grew up Catholic. And Oh, it's making me emotional. I haven't talked about this for so
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
But I was behind the church, and and I had a piece of glass, and I was thinking about, I was starting to cut my wrist open, and I started to think, like, what's going to happen to me here?
Mm,
Like, how am I not going to get stolen? Was
yeah.
my thought. Like, someone's going to grab me and I'm not going to
Yeah.
know what to do. And, I have been a child, and a woman my whole life who has been very deeply connected to my intuition. Very, very, very deeply connected to my intuition. I had a near death experience at 5 years old where my head was cracked open, and that stuff started to happen after that. And then at 18, I had a heart attack in my sleep. I had another near death experience, and that got stronger even still after that. So here I am behind this church at 12 years old and crying and crying. And I remember just, it's going to sound, it's wild because I heard this voice inside of me that just said, just hold on till you're 18 years old. 18
Mm,
years old. And I remember thinking, what does that mean? 18 years old, what is my life going to look like between now and 18 years old? And
mhm,
so I just did the things that I intuitively knew to do. So in the winter months where I didn't have anywhere to live, I would wait until it got really dark, probably 1 a.m, and start knocking on my friends' windows to let me in. And this is all decided at school during the day, like where I could go and how I could show up. And so I was living church bathrooms, cars, with friends. I've lived in closets, under beds. Like, that was my whole existence. And it was just getting through to the next day. And at one point, very early on in that whole thing, I was underneath this tree, and the pine, the leaves and the branches came down to the ground, and so there were all these dead pine needles under the tree. And I was lying under there, and I thought I felt safe because no one could see me under there, and it was a massive space. But I looked over, and to my right there was a knot in the tree, and there was a sign there, and it said "Home Sweet Home." And I thought about it for a
mm,
second, and I remember thinking, no, 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 this is just what I'm doing right now. This is not who I am. And I knew
mm,
that really, really, really young. So
mm,
for me, the goal was food, shelter, finish school, and I just did that on repeat until I could start working. And then I added in working, and then when I was able to get an apartment and live on my own, I quit school. And so that's how that happened. But it was this internal, I'm telling you, when I say people need to meditate, we need to meditate because we need to learn to slow down the mind so that we
mhm,
can hear ourselves think. And our mind
mm,
can't be inundated with tons of, music and noise and other people's opinions and other people's directives. It has to be stillness, and it has to be, to the point, like slowing down the thinking. This is not something I could do at 12 yet, but slow down the thinking so that you can hear your intuitive GPS systems telling you, like what the next, good move is for you.
mhm,
So I've been very connected to that and always working on listening to that. And I pay attention just to observe and not to judge myself, but I pay attention to what happens when I listen, and I pay attention to what happens when I don't. And it's very obvious, to me that when my intuition says turn right here, I turn right here. I might not have been going that way, but there's something's going on, and so I just follow it. But yeah.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that,
Yeah.
especially the tough stuff.
Yeah.
If I can then perhaps put survival identity into a sentence that you said, I think it was, I just did what I needed to do to get through the day to the next one, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Is that what we can kind of encapsulate here as what's still going on a perhaps deeper emotional level with people who are holding that mask and holding that identity, that they're just following the pattern that's going to get them through the day to the next one?
Yeah, for sure. But this is like the survival identity for me, and this might not be everybody's story, I think, but for people who are struggling with the stuff we're talking about,
Yeah.
the survival identity was created during one of the worst moments of your entire life. And,
Mm,
it usually happens in childhood, and you didn't have the awareness to think, I just need to be this kind of person to survive this situation. Our worldview now becomes that home is not safe, or
mm,
fathers are not safe, or mothers are not safe. You know what I mean? And
mhm,
so,
mhm,
then we compound on what we're doing that's working. And then we become that person. And it's why so many women around, 20, 25, even 30 will say, why do I keep dating the same guy? It's the same guy over and over and over again. He just has a different face. It's because of that. It's that survival identity is at work. And it's just simply going, after what it knows to go after and what's working, for them at the time. And then we reach a point where we're just like, I don't know, I co-participated in the building of this entire life. Why do I not feel connected to it? And it's that you created a whole life to the mask. Like everything that you thought that this strong version of you needed to be, you created a mask, and everything, you're like a sonar with your wants and your desires to the universe. So you're sending out all of these signals that are coming to the version of you that's not the real you. So all of a sudden you're like sitting in the middle of it all, and you're like wondering why you're so overwhelmed and so burnt out. And I think it's the old survival identity, the old paradigm fighting the new one space, and I think that that's it. And it's not to hate that version of yourself at all. Hold that version of yourself close, because that version of yourself got you here, helped you survive some really hard shit in your life, and so it's to be loved and to be thanked and to be grateful for it. But it's also to let it go and know that you don't need to pretend your way through things anymore. All the stuff that you don't say when no one's around you at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like that stuff, like you can really live into the self that you really want to be when you decide to do this with intention. Like, I'm tired of living this way, I don't need to be XYZ anymore, show me how to do it. And you're ready to like step into creating this beautiful world that you want to live in. You see it in your mind, you should have it, and so it's about stepping into it with intention, right?
Hey folks, Traver here. I imagine you caught a few minutes ago when Tanya said everybody should be meditating. I 1000% agree. Years ago, I was interviewed by a fitness magazine asking whether I thought if I could prescribe meditation or fitness, which would be better for people. And I remember being torn at the time, but today, with AI, with social media, with the frenzied, chaotic nature of our lives, I would actually choose meditation. I have created a course that has since helped thousands and thousands of people just like you go from 0 minutes of meditation to 20 minutes of meditation. The 20-minute mark is where something magical happens and the benefits of meditation start pouring in. So if you're new to meditation, you want to get back to meditation, or you just want to see what happens at that 20-minute mark, please go to www.manuncivilized.com/meditation, not mediation, meditation, and hop on the course. All right, back to Tanya. So for someone listening to this who's questioning, am I still operating from that mask and that identity? Have I moved into more of a soul-led expression? What are some ways they can start to do an audit or identity, like take a peek, or how does someone tease out where they're operating from in your understanding?
Well, I mean, I guess it'll be in all the ways that you're just sick and tired of living your life is the first indication. So, if you're a performer, which is one of the 5 survival identities.
Yeah, can we go through the 5?
Oh, for
Sorry
sure
to
we
interrupt
can.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's hyper independent.
Okay.
I'm an island. I do everything by myself, even though I don't want to, pushing away anything that makes you feel vulnerable, or like anybody could see, that you can't actually do it yourself. There's the performer who needs everybody to believe that everything is perfectly fine, always controlling perception. Also, I will say for the hyper independent, there's always going to be a little bit of a pleaser in there because you've learned that in order to get your way, you got to give a little bit too, and so, but we don't know how to do that healthily. So that becomes a problem as well, because you're not your true self when you're in pleaser mode. Then there's the pleaser, who needs to be liked and needs everything to go a certain way. People like really heavily like controlling perception. I need you to not hurt me, so I'm going to be everything you need me to be. The people pleaser typical. And then there's the caretaker who does not feel like she is anything unless she is taking care of everybody else's needs before her own. No matter what, she will die on that cross. Right? Yeah. Everybody needs her more than she needs to focus on self. And then the last one is the invisible one. And this is the one who has found so much safety in staying behind the scenes, even though she dreams of like having this life, and she could have it. That's the thing. I believe that anything we have on the screen of our mind, we can really create in real life. But if you're being held up by these identities, these survival identities that are like, we tried this before and that didn't work. And, what are you
Mm,
doing? Stop
mhm,
it. We're
mhm,
happy. It's like that kind of thinking constantly. So yeah, like if you're inside of any of those things, like I do believe that we're all adults. We're very aware of what we no longer want to be living inside of. It is very painful to be a hyper independent person,
mm,
never allowing yourself to be truly vulnerable when all you're really wanting is safety and
mhm,
connection. And you want to know that you can be held, properly and slow down without it all falling apart.
mm.
So I think that what were you
Yeah.
asking me? Your first question, was that it?
Actually, I'm gonna shift this really quickly to like a sub question of: do you see a major difference in these five archetypes gendered? Do men and women present in each of them in a markedly different way, or is it kind of the same across the board?
I work primarily with women and I've always
Okay.
worked primarily with women, but
Okay.
I mean that's not to say I think survival identities are created inside of toxic environments for both
Mm.
people.
Hmm.
Like it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl when you're 5 years old. If you've
Sure.
got a
Sure.
parent who's, an alcoholic or an
Hmm.
abuser in all the ways, you're going to create, that sense of self that needs to survive this situation. You are going to become so hyper aware of their movements, their eye gestures. It's the same thing in the body. I don't think that really changes until we get a little bit older than that and we start to understand self.
Yeah.
But until someone points it out with you, they say something like, I don't know, your hair is really ugly. And then suddenly you're like, that's right, I have
Mm.
hair. You start like going over all the other things that could be wrong with you, like really around
Yeah.
six. But before
Mm.
that, I do believe that they are all started exactly the same way. I've met people pleaser men who are toxic narcissists.
Mm.
I've met psychopathic, hyper independent, psychopathic narcissistic men who are terrified of being actually being visible
Hmm.
properly. I've met beautiful, men with great big hearts who just can't be themselves. They're just terrified to step into what they want. And I can see through talking with them. And I can also tell a lot of the time through the way that a person will hold their body. I've studied
Mm.
people for a really long time. Part of my
Sure.
survival identity was in studying people,
Yeah.
but but yeah, I've seen total collapse with both men and women because it is just so painful and just so frightening to be
Hmm.
on the precipice of, it feels like death. Do I
Hmm.
have to give everything up to truly
Mm.
find out who I am?
Hmm.
Sometimes the answer might be yes. If you've attracted an entire life to the mask and it's truly not what you wanted, deep
Yeah.
down inside you're like like the serious creative and you've got this crazy talent that you just don't tell anyone about because you're just scared of anyone knowing. That's your thing. Go run
Hmm.
towards that. But
Mm.
it's okay. That's the other piece of it too. It's okay to let go of what's not meant for you because you're just dragging it. You're
Yeah.
dragging it behind you everywhere you go. So the relief I think that would come with really stepping into true self,
Mm.
that's such an indicator. If all you're doing is thinking about having a different kind of a life and you know exactly what that is, but you're scared to step into it,
Yeah.
you're at the precipice. You're right there.
Mm. Tanya, for someone who just heard all that, was like, that's me. Like, I am that damn archetype she just mentioned. It's been 20 years. I'm sick of shit of this. What's step one? They know it, so they've identified it. Like, what's right? Is it? Yeah, I won't even ask. I won't even seed it. What's step one?
Well, I have a challenge that we can talk about
Okay.
later,
Okay.
specifically for people to walk through.
Okay.
But step one is always going to just be in the awareness. Like, what is working in my life? What is not working in my life that I keep trying to force? Like
Mm.
it's okay that things end. I do believe that things are supposed to end at very specific times. Sometimes we keep them dragging on for longer because we don't want to let go or we've invested so much time we feel like it's a failure. So
Sure.
I think it's just being in the awareness that something's not right, and to journal it, like take pen to paper. I'm very old school like this. There's a magical thing
Me
that
too.
happens between the
Yeah.
brain and the hand,
Yeah.
to write it all down, but just to be in the awareness of it. And then what meaning am I giving this?
Mm.
Nothing has meaning until we give it meaning, right?
Sure.
So, what am I making this mean? What am I making it mean about me? What am I making it mean about my world and my life? And then make a list of like, what are my fears and my limitations right now? Like, where does my mind automatically go? when I feel, pushed to the edge like this.
Mm.
For example, a lot of hyper independent people will have learned to survive inside of chaos. The pressure, like getting out of that situation, the pressure is the thing that we've connected ourselves to
Mm.
inside of that moment. It's being able to survive something under that kind of unbelievable pressure. And we've prided ourselves on that for so long. And then you
Yeah.
hit a point in your life where you're like, oh my God, I can't with the pressure anymore. Like that's a good indicator, right? So pay
Yeah.
attention to what's happening in the body, pay attention to how you feel, and just to bear witness, not to judge. Please don't, for anyone who's listening, don't ever judge yourself for this stuff, because there's a reason you're going through it and you're feeling it. It's because you're supposed to get yourself through that. Like
Yeah.
ask the questions, right?
Can you give us like a street side example, like a on the ground example of a potential? I don't want you to out a client, but someone that you can anonymously share a bit of the story of identified this, looked at that, saw that, let this go, and then after effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got lots of clients. I've also got lots of clients who don't, but I have a lot of clients who have how you come to the table. Let me preface this by saying this. How you come
Okay.
to that table, really matters. Do you believe
Mm.
that you deserve to come to that table? Do you believe that there's something greater for you in your life? Even with everything that you've done, even everything you've gone through, are you holding on to your story? You've made that your identity, so
Mm.
much so that coming to the table means that you like that story is still alive, and that's
Yeah.
you're just going to be reinforcing that identity. So how you come to the table really matters. This is what I've noticed. And how rooted you are and grounded into something that's bigger than you matters.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, for people who are ready and they're like so excited to get into this work, usually because they're so sick and tired of being so sick and tired, like it's
Mm.
hit that point. And that's why I say, like, 40s and 50s and beyond is where this work really happens, because something interesting happens at 40 where you just stop giving a shit about anything. Anything that's not working, you're just like, screw it. It just doesn't matter anymore, right? So that helps too. But yeah, so yeah, I've seen a lot of clients who have taken this and they run with it and they get the work done because they're excited, for this new
Mm.
life. They're excited. I'm
Mm.
I'm one of those people. I've rebuilt myself and had ego deaths and identity deaths so many times now, that I
Mm.
know what you're thinking as you're going through it. I know how scared you are, and I think that's the piece, well, you'll know with your coaching too. That's the piece that people, that's what they really need, is to know that how they're thinking and feeling, that as they're going
Mm.
through it, you can help them anticipate what's coming so that they can circumnavigate that, and it helps the process even faster, which I think is really cool. But yeah, I've got a lot of people in my world who I am so damn proud of, because they
Mm.
stopped holding on to this old paradigm of, well, what if something goes wrong? And
Mm.
it's now a
Mm.
cliched thing. I've been saying it for so long, but why not think, what if it all works out? What if it
Mm.
all
Mm.
goes right? Then what?
Sure.
Then
Sure. Sure.
what?
Sure. What is most people's base level fear when it comes to shifting a life that's unsatisfactory into one that is satisfactory? Because a lot of the things, or one of the things I read uh, around you, was that you work with a lot of people who are high achievers, and I see this all the time, specifically with high achieving men. Is every single damn box we were supposed to check got checked, but then the internal satisfaction box, or the joy, or even a level of peace around, or even acknowledgement of the accomplishments, is missing. So as a logical human, if you were to say to me, beautiful, you've checked these three boxes and you still don't feel the thing you want to feel, not checking the three above it won't work. Can we come over here on the other side and actually start working on the internal aspects of your life, or more alignment with your life? As a logical person, that does make sense to me. If you presented that to me on a spreadsheet, I'd be like, yeah, Tanya, I get it. And then the next day you're like, cool, so stop chasing the next big accomplishment. I'd be like, all right, we're going to slow the fuck down here. Like, calm yourself, lady. I don't know you that well. Well, I just have 5 more achievements that I have to make. And I swear to God, another $500,000 in revenue, and I will feel all the great things that I've wanted to feel my whole life, that I promised myself I'd feel at every demarcation along the way. What is the emotional piece underneath that keeps us going, no, I won't go left. I just will go harder right.
It's the fear of the unknown, number one, and not
Okay.
knowing what it is. It's disconnection from the body. It's not
Mm,
understanding how your nervous system is playing a huge part in this. And it's
okay.
also just leaning on that old survival strategy, that old paradigm of, I already know what to do. That's fine. I know it's like the devil, it's, one of the reasons
Right,
that a
right,
lot of women stay in these terrifying relationships. It's because I know what to expect. I know
right.
what's going to happen here. I don't know what's going to happen out there. And
Mm,
so when you're at higher levels of income and you've made a really big name for yourself,
sure.
just the idea of slowing it down or adding something in that might, the fear is I'm going to lose it all. And
Yeah.
then what?
Mm,
Like, how am I going to sustain all of this? Like, so,
hmm.
okay. So to be, I'm going to be you now. It would
Okay.
be like, like, no, I know what works. You don't know what works, and
Right.
that's the problem, is that we let that survival identity lead. So really, I guess the number one thing I would say to you, I'd get you to breathe with me, just to calm it
Mm,
down a little bit and ask you how you
hmm.
feel in your body right after you accomplish the thing that you're trying to accomplish.
Mm.
Because if you're moving that goalpost and you're
Yeah.
automatically like, how am I going to do this again? How am I going to have this happen again? Or what's the
Yeah.
next big achievement? And you're moving because you're an
Yeah.
achievement driven person, and you're constantly moving into the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Then that feeling in the body of never being settled, never,
Hmm.
never feeling like you're actually accomplished, never celebrating your wins,
Yeah.
that's the problem right there. So it's
Mm,
not that you're, achieving necessarily. That's great. You know how to make money. It's great that you're achieving, but what's happening to you internally in those moments in between? Because that's
mm.
that's where we would want to pay attention.
Yeah. Thank you. I remember having an ex once ask me, and this was years ago, do you think you'll ever be satisfied? And I remember saying, I hope not,
Mm,
because then where's my drive going to come from? Like, well,
yeah.
then what am I going to do? Just fucking lay down and die at that point? Like, what else is there to live for? And I can see in hindsight what was happening and feel now the beautiful satisfaction that I have without the major, grand slam home run accomplishment on
Mm,
a day-to-day level. But that's hard to translate to a lot of, so I find it hard to translate even with clients saying, can you, your goal is to find satisfaction in the mundane, because that is the vast majority of our lives.
mm,
It isn't signing the book deal. It isn't the Oscar. It isn't the winning the Grand Slam race or whatever it is. It is in the Tuesday morning, cup of coffee with your wife or watching your kid do something. So how do you help paint an after picture for someone who's addicted to that cycle of accomplishment, very momentarily feeling okay or good, and then the drop, and then at the bottom of the drop saying, cool, I just need one more accomplishment, and then being stuck in that loop? How do you describe what life could be like when there is a connection to your soul, there is a connection to your breath, there is a connection to that terrifying word satisfaction?
Um, I think okay. Well, what I'm feeling to talk about is, I think what you're talking about is building the capacity to sit in inside of it and to be
Mm,
okay with
okay.
what it is that you want. And I
Sure.
think that we have to remember, as souls in bodies having a human
Mm,
experience, which is what this is, we are here to literally learn how to manifest through the physical. We already know how to manifest. We're master manifestors. Everything you have in your life that you wanted, you manifested. Everything you don't want, you manifested. It
mm,
was because of whatever you got emotionally involved in. So, if we think about it, really think about it, we're here to master the emotional pieces of things. We're in this very dense low vibration, on this low vibration planet, because we're meant to learn to master the emotional side of it. So, if you're feeling so discombobulated and so disconnected from yourself, then we need to learn to rewire the nervous system. You must, so that you
mm,
can start to step out of the comfort zone in a way that you want to, but you're scared to, so that you can come back to safety and then keep building the expansion for that.
mm.
You have to be able to do that, because there's nothing wrong with achieving. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with being driven and ambitious. Gosh, you pulled those words right out of my own mouth. I used to say that too. Like, when am I never want to be satisfied. But it's a
Right.
different, and saying that, you got to be careful, because, you're almost asking for a lesson with those words. It's like asking for patience.
Right,
Don't do
right,
that
right.
unless you really want a huge lesson of life. Right. So yeah, that's lived experience. But yeah, so like you got to be careful. Like, how do I never want to be satisfied? Well, I always want to be searching for a deeper meaning to myself in my life. I never
Mm,
want to just be staying stuck in the old self and just letting life pass me by. I want to be in my life. I want to
yeah,
feel alive. So we have to be careful what we say, number one. And number two, like it's, I don't know, having that drive and wanting to do things is fantastic, but it's the intention behind it that
sure.
really makes all the difference in the world. Does that answer your question?
It does for me. I'm curious for the listener. Can you speak a little bit about what day to day looks and feels like for someone
Mm.
who is both driven and satisfied, who is both soul led and still accomplishing? Because I think the binary I had in my head years ago was, if I get in touch with the deeper parts of myself and express them fully, I will get a level of satisfaction that will absolutely decimate my drive. And I will be
Yes.
like a happy homeless person walking the streets, you know, like waving at squirrels,
I thought the
but
same thing
I'm
too.
not
Yeah.
writing any more books, because those sometimes require 12-hour days, 14-hour days, pushing through the hard shit that I don't want to push through just to get because I have trauma. I want to push through because there's a deep desire to put that book out in the world, whether it hits the New York Times bestseller list or nobody reads it. It's just me expressing myself deeply. So I guess the question, to bring it to circle back, is, what does it look and feel like for someone who has both a connection to their
Right.
soul and the satisfaction that comes with it and drives still with that?
I think that, well, this is going to probably rock a few people because they're not there yet, if they're listening, and they're wanting to know how to do this, but it is a slower morning. It is connected to self mourning. It is meditation. It is studying in the morning. It is working in the morning, but with intention. It is taking time for the body to work out, to get outside, to get by the ocean or get into the forest. It is a slower way of being, but the difference is that you're understanding how it is always going to be about what you're getting emotionally involved in. So if you are super, in the knowing that what it is you want, you are manifesting it, you are drawing it towards you, you are the person who wins, you are the person who things always work out for. The whatever you put your mind on is what you're going to get more of. So whatever you get emotionally involved with is what you're telling your brain. You're giving your brain the directive to look out for. So the other side of this, with total internal authority, is a very deep knowing that everything is working out exactly the way that it's supposed to, and you're more in the beingness than you are in the doing. That's going to rock hyper independent people to their core, because you're so used to drive and you're so used to going after what you want under that pressure, like, and doing it that way. And there's nothing wrong with going after the things that you want to go after, but what is the intention underneath that? Is
Mm,
it never enough? Is it never enough? Is it
mm,
never, like, you just keep moving the goalposts in your life? If you're a pleaser, and you're always looking, going after the things that you want in your life, but you're controlling perception all the time, and you're like, fuck, I wish people knew who I really was at my core.
mm,
Nobody knows me. You're so disconnected.
mm,
So to me, it's the flip side of all of those things. You don't, something really funny happens when you go through like a spiritual awakening. You don't need people the way you thought you needed people before. You don't.
mm.
Because now, instead of looking outside of yourself to have other people fill your cup, you are filling your own cup, and you're
Sure,
doing it with happiness and satisfaction. Like, you're understanding. Now, that's not to say we don't need community, because we do.
sure.
We need to be in community. That's how humans are. I mean, this is what we're need. But it's like more of a biological thing, where I don't think it's healthy for people to be alone for too long.
Yeah.
I just don't, I mean, for lots of different reasons, which we could get into that if you wanted. But I just feel like, when you're working on yourself with this kind of intention, and you're letting go of all of the ways that life has held you down, and you're living in it now, like, you're like, this is
Mm,
it, like, I'm actually living as the self that I always wanted to be. It's a calm in the body. It's being able to achieve at that level without the drive that it's going to all be taken away from me, or I'm going to
mhm,
lose it all. It's being seen and letting yourself have your voice and, express yourself the way that you want to, and you don't care what other people think anymore.
Yeah.
So there's no reason that you can't still have the full life that you want. But if you're drinking a lot,
Mm,
you're doing drugs, or, you're participating in activities that don't make you feel good about your life and about
mhm,
yourself, and you're
mm,
like on the brink, of disaster
yeah.
internally,
Yeah.
like that to me is, I don't think any amount of money is going to give you what you want inside of that situation. So it's time for, you need to move in a different direction. Now, the day-to-day stuff, it is in the minutia, these
Mm,
big changes. It is in the way that we wake up in the morning. It's what we say to ourselves before we go to bed. It's in how we react versus, respond. It is in the smaller things. It's the way that we stop ourselves, and can pay attention without shame and guilt and judgment. It's like all of these little pieces that come together, and pretty soon you're like, oh my God, holy shit, I am her. I am the version of myself that I said I was going to be. I'm
mhm,
doing it. And that's the thing. Like, it's just such a freeing thing, and you're moving through the world in a different way. Your worldview changes. You're no
mm,
longer afraid of trusting people anymore because you trust yourself so deeply. Like, that's the number one thing that I hear when people say I don't trust people, or I don't trust the world around me. What I hear instantly is I am just so disconnected from myself that I don't know who I am anymore.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because what's yeah.
One of my deepest teachers says the same. He's a therapist, has been for 50 years. Says every time someone comes in and says I don't trust anybody, it's like
Mm.
what I hear is I don't trust myself.
Now, the person might not realize that on a
Sure,
conscious level,
for
but
sure.
that's what that
They
is.
don't.
Yeah.
They don't.
Yep.
I want to ask a tiny bit of a devil's advocate question for you,
Okay.
because, and I want to frame this right, so I may fumble through it. I understand the deeper emotional aspects of a survival mask or survival identity, and yet I also understand, or I believe, like there was a time in my life when I really was just trying to survive, and I now charge 75 times more per hour than I did in my 20s, because I've built a life and a business and experience and a master's degree and yada yada. But in my 20s, I could hear all of this and say, amazing, I'm kind to myself, I like who I am, and I've got school loans to pay off, I don't make shit for money, I don't really understand the world, I'm actually in survival mode because I'm still trying to figure life out and survive.
Hmm.
How do we speak to and I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, like the privileged position I feel like I am in now. I'm 50. I run a business. In the beginning of even running this business, it was 20-hour days,
Mm.
and people were like, "Hey, you just need to change your thought. You just need to relax more and have a slower morning." I'm like, "Well, maybe." And I need to reach out to people who don't know who the hell I am in the world. So how do we, I guess the question I'm asking, Tanya, is how do we speak to people who are actually surviving and haven't done the perhaps groundwork to get out of that position, right? I'm talking about a single parent who has a job and is also going to grad school.
Okay.
They're in survival mode. And they're like, take your slow morning and shove it. I got two sick kids, a sick parent, I have homework, and yada yada. Versus, upper level professionals who are still in that mode. Like I have a buddy who's worth about $8 million, who
Mm.
could retire today, talks about retiring and just teaching, but is still doing 19-hour days, and his wife's not that happy with him, and his kids don't know who he is.
Mm.
He's the one I want to share this podcast with, not the person who's like, hey, I'm just actually trying to figure life out. Can you, I'm not sure I'm asking a question here, but I want to separate for people hearing this who may be coming out of a shit situation, maybe rebuilding their lives, that the survival place that they're in isn't just mental and emotional. Or do you actually believe that all of the survival, everybody's in a mental emotional state, or is some of it just physical or circumstantial?
Well, I guess I'd have to, learn a little bit more about the person, like where specifically they're coming from, like what is actually happening. As soon as people,
Sure.
when I say to people, tell me what goes on in your mind, and they say what
Yeah.
is going on in their mind, I hear something totally different. I know what's really going
Hmm.
on in their mind.
Sure, sure, sure.
But if I'm speaking to your friend who has been
Yeah.
like in that much work, and he's on the brink of, maybe losing everything,
Yeah.
and being left only with the money and being left with
Mm.
only with the business if he makes it alive out of that
Mhm.
relationship with that even. It takes me back to myself when I was going through that 18-year relationship, and I knew I had to get out, and it was an abusive relationship, not physically, but emotionally, psychologically. So I'll paint a picture for you. So I'm sitting at the table. I just took my oldest child to school, and my youngest child is having a nap, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table in this shitty little apartment, and I'm looking out the window and I'm crying, like crying. I was crying in the morning in the bathroom. I was crying every single day in the bathroom. I didn't know
Mm.
what I was going to do. And then the kids would knock on the door, and I'd have to come out of the bathroom like that, take them to school and see all the people, and, manage perception. And that was my life. And I hadn't been working for a decade, and so I was like, how the hell do I get out of this situation?
Mm.
So I'm sitting at the table, probably for the 140th time, crying. And suddenly I realized, like, what are you doing right now? Where is your head? How much of this am I willing to keep shoving under the rug in order just to
Mm.
maintain whatever crap feeling I'm in, trying to pretend my way through this relationship? For who? Who am I doing this for? Who benefits from this? Because I'm ready to, like, literally, in my case, which is different than your friends, I wanted out. Like, I wanted out
Mhm.
of this, but how the hell
Mhm.
was I going to do it with these circumstances? So I will speak to that person a little bit, the one who's really
Sure.
stuck and doesn't know what to do. If my thinking is, this isn't going to work, I can't do this, nothing's working out, this is going to end in me being homeless and living on the street,
Yeah.
like that I was terrified of that. If that's my thinking, then what do you think I'm going to create for myself? Because all of my emotional body is invested in staying very loyal to what is never going to work.
Mm.
So I was like, what are you doing? Like, I know better than that. I've been through stuff like this before. So I
Mhm.
woke up out of the fog, because that's what we're in when we're in that place. We're pretending our way through it. We're in a fog. We're just like unwilling to see or can't. Then I was like, no, okay, so what do I want instead? So I started to write it down. If I could have my life look the way I want it to look, what do I have to do? And so I was writing it all down, writing it all down. And, I don't know, one thing after the other just started showing up and in place. One of the things was, I called a friend of mine. She was a brand new friend. And I said I was looking for an apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment. I will sleep on the couch. The kids will have the room. This is what I was going to do. And could you please find me an apartment? And I had no money. And so she found me an apartment for, I think it was like $2,500 in Toronto at Yonge and
Mm.
Eglinton. If you know, Toronto is a really expensive place. And so I was like, I can't, there's no way in the world I could do that. And I said, do you think that you could just talk him down and see how low you can go? And so she got me this apartment for $1,800, everything included, which is unheard of. So I took this apartment and I figured it out from there. I'm telling you, growing up, like living in a survival identity of knowing that you can handle it, you know, this is the worst part about survival identities. You won't know because you're used to being pushed up against a wall to figure it out. You're used to doing it when all the cards fall, then you figure it out and you find your way
Mhm.
yourself out of this,
Mhm.
so I've managed to turn that around and stop doing that like that. But anyway, to speak to that, the only way I got out of that is because I was thinking, I have to get my way out of this. Like, this has to work.
Mhm.
This has to work.
Mhm.
This has to work. It's going to work. It's working. I'm getting the place. I'm going to figure out the money. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Like, I literally was in this thinking 24/7. Now, with your friend, if he wants to keep his relationship together, he needs to understand. Well, see, I don't know him, so it's hard for me to say specifically. If he's self-involved and he's self-driven, and
Mm.
that's all he's seeing, because in his mind he's thinking, what is the problem? Look at all of this success we have. Look at all the
Mhm.
things that I've done for this family. Like, I don't know what the problem is. Like, we have everything because of this.
Mhm.
He's going to need to stop and slow down. He's very much in his survival identity, very much in hyper independent, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
No, there's no like ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, in his business, if somebody else needs something, he might be more prone to give there, because the other one he's building a resentment up against, it seems like. Right. So
Mhm.
for me, with your friend, women are here, we're here and we're in our hearts, and when a woman has had enough, she's had enough. And so she's going to, eventually walk away, because she's going to not feel seen and heard by this person.
Sure, sure.
I don't know. It would be hard. It's hard for me to say with your friend, but
Definitely. definitely. I think I was just trying to get a little bit more down to, is there a time when we have to have a survival mask on because we are still surviving? Maybe that's the
Well,
question.
no. I think that it's important for us to understand that we've been living in survival and building an entire life around this version of ourselves. We're going to give ourselves a heart attack or a stroke if we keep going at that level. You
Yeah.
know, like, no, I don't think that we should have a survival mask. I think that it's been built inside of us or for us, around us, because of what we went through. We've just been reinforcing it our whole lives,
Yeah.
but when you're about to lose everything, I mean,
Mm,
that to me is the indicator that
definitely.
you need to like have a look at, what have you attracted to your life, based on your need to perform or your need, your drive, your ambition to make a certain amount of money or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Because underneath it all, it can't feel good that your life is falling apart and you don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
remember telling my team at Uncivilized a couple years ago, we're not a startup anymore. So we need to stop acting like a startup where it's
Mm,
just putting out the next fire and doing the next sprint and the next sprint. That we have some experience underneath us and we need to relax into that experience. Otherwise, we're going to fry ourselves. We're all going to burn out, the whole team.
mm,
That we've hit a different phase. And
mm.
so I understand what you're saying for people. I think that's super helpful. I would love to hear this challenge. I have it down on my note. I have two more things I'd love to hear from you
Okay.
about the challenge. And then what does a soul led life mean to you? So we
Mm.
can maybe start with the challenge and then finish with that because that's one of my favorite questions for anybody.
Okay. Okay, so the challenge that I have, I created an app for this. And the app basically, I've downloaded about 150 documents with my way of thinking around this. This is my education. This is, my personal study. I've got a bachelor's in psychology. I'm a life coach certified. I've got a bunch of other certifications as part of my survival identity. I need more. I need more. Yeah, right. To feel worthy, I guess. But yeah, so like everything that I've learned and all of my experience and basically what I think at my core, and I've put it into this app, and then you walk yourself through it, and it gives you prompts every day, and it drives your question, like it drives the questions for you. So you watch the training, which I've done, and then you're inside of the questions now, and you got to be like as honest as you possibly can with it because it's going to give you. Nobody can see it but you. I can't see it either, but it'll give you at the end of it like a blueprint. And at the end of the 5 days of this challenge, you end up with a blueprint: how I function with money, what I need to
Mm,
pay attention to, how I function in my relationships,
mm,
what's the driving force behind this, what should I be doing instead based on my own answers. Should what could I be doing to give myself a better experience, and the whole driving thing for me with this is that you got to ask better questions in order to get better experiences, and we're
mm,
here to experience life. We're here to really experience life. So whatever's up here is going to be how you experience life. So
mm,
if the goal is to have a life that's free of the limitations and the thinking, and all the ways that we hold ourselves back, then you need to be asking better questions, and if this is a great place to start. So it's 5 days of this. It's going to diagnose you, through every single stage of your life. And at the end of it, you end up with this blueprint and you at least know what the next step should be for you. You can see your blind spots now. It's laid out for you. It's all interactive. And it's heavily dependent on the way that you answer the questions. So take as much time as you need with it. Once you're in, and you get to keep your blueprint forever.
yeah, soul led. I ask this a lot because it's a loaded word. For a lot of people, it has a religious connotation or it has a bypassy connotation. So I'm curious for you, when you say soul led, what does that mean? And how does someone know if they're expressing themselves from a soulful place rather than perhaps ego trauma, other starting points or expression points? How do people differentiate between soul led and other?
I think ego. Ego plays a very primary role in whether or not you're living an actual soul led life. And I don't mean the kind of
Sure.
ego where you're like, I kick ass at this, I'm great at this thing. It's not that. It's the kind of ego where, excuse me, I know better than you. It's the kind of
Mm,
ego that's like, I don't need to hear this. Nothing you tell
mhm,
me is going to help me. I've met a few people like that. So it's like when you're in that closed offness from your life, this is going to stop you from even entering into that. You have children, right? So do you remember you don't have children?
I don't know.
Finding Nemo. I thought you said you had children before. Finding Nemo. There's a part. Have you ever seen the movie?
Gosh, Tanya, I think I did like a
I gotta
decade
talk
ago.
about this
Yeah.
because this is so
Yeah.
funny. I
Okay,
think
do
that
it.
I think that each one of us has, we all have our own frequencies. So when you hear people say, raise the frequency, raise the vibration, what that means is you need to clear away all the shit so that you can stay in your aligned frequency to
Mm,
align the things to you that your heart wants more than anything, which is why
mhm,
you're here on this planet. You're here to get to that point. So all the obstacles, all the emotional shit, and all the other stuff that gets in the way is your ascension piece. This is your
mm,
video game that you're in. So how fast you get there is up to you. You might not get there at all. So if that's the goal, pure happiness, being able to attract money to me, call in every single thing that I want, you need to move the stuff away so that you can stay inside of that frequency and stop dipping out of it, for this shiny new thing or that thing. So you just want to stay aligned inside of your frequency. And I always use the Finding Nemo thing, because when he's like trying to find his way, to figure out like where he's supposed to go to find his dad, he meets this little turtle, and the little turtle is like, oh, well, you don't have to swim all the way across the ocean. There's this way to get there faster. And he's like, what do you mean? And so he jumps. The turtle's like, we just got to jump inside of that thing right there. It's that fast moving, like funnel, like a tunnel of water. It's so quick.
mm,
And all
mhm,
the fish are in the know. They're like, of
mm,
course you don't swim across the ocean. Get inside here. It's like a roller coaster. So
mhm,
what does he do? He throws himself in and he topples a little bit, and then he's in it. Now he's going to get across the ocean. And so,
mm,
and then it's a whole adventure after that. But that's what the frequency is like. You keep telling yourself that you're able just to keep doing it the way that you're doing it, but you're so unhappy with what you're doing, or it's not
mm,
fulfilling you. It's just ego stuff. Like, I've created this, I've done that. I found myself doing that when I first started my business. I was so happy. I wrote a book. It was doing, like co-wrote a book. It was doing really, really well. We had a big book launch. I had a podcast. I was brand new at this, and it was all ego metrics. I have
mm,
this, I've done this, I've done this, and so
mhm,
attached to my identity story. It was all of that, and so it took me a long time to get here. 10
mm,
years, in this business has taken me it took me a long time to get here, because my own self, I was so attached to my identity. My ego was just not letting me, the old paradigm was not letting me become the
mm,
paradigm. So to me, a soul led life means, just being able to strip yourself of the things that are no longer working for you.
mm,
If you think of like a hoarder's room, how are you going to get from one side to the other without clearing away all of the stuff that you don't need anymore? You're
yeah.
meant to be in your unique vibration. You're meant to be in your unique frequency. And you have the ability to call in everything you want, but not if it's, like the underlying pieces of it are, I can't have it. I can't do this. I know how to do it. Thank you. This is too terrifying. I'm not even going to look at this, but I'll go polish off a whole bottle of wine. It's like
Mm,
stuff like that. Like, the ego will keep you trapped in this feeling that you need outside of you in order to sustain who you are as a human being. And the more internal authority, spiritually aligned piece is like, hello, no, you don't.
mm,
You don't need those things.
mhm,
So it's the internal work. Like, you have to be willing and able. You don't have to do anything, but in order to have the kind of life that you want, are you willing and are you able to do what it takes to get there? And that
mhm,
doesn't mean in the, I'm gonna like, do and keep moving the goalposts. Like, are you willing and able to become the version of you that you say you want to be, and then move from there?
mhm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's put a pin in it there.
Yeah.
For people who are interested in finding you, finding your work, finding your books or book, where can we send them?
You can send them to on Instagram or Facebook. So on Instagram, you can find me at Tanya Marie Dubé official, and on Facebook, I don't really use my business page. I use my profile. It's at Tanya Marie Dubé. And
Beautiful.
then, I have a link there, my link tree, which is, link tree and then / Tanya Marie Dubé. That's where you can find, podcasts like this one that we're on, and other things that I've done, some free resources. I've got my challenge. It's a paid challenge. It's an $11 challenge. And whatever else I've got going on at the time. I'm a manifesting generator, so I'm constantly learning and upgrading my stuff and offering new things that are fun and exciting. So yeah.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to everybody who's listening. This was so much fun. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening, folks. Cheers.
Bye.
Do you want to help support the podcast? I know you do. Perfect. Here's how. Please take 12 seconds, scroll down, slap us with a 5-star review, and share this episode with one person in your life. Think about this. You tip your bartender and he serves you poison. And all I'm doing is pouring soul-stirring truth right into your ears. And if you haven't gotten a chance to grab one of my books, please get a hold of Today I Rise, snag a copy of Man Uncivilized, or get yourself some 28 Days in Darkness. Buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend, and buy one for your ex who's still watching your Instagram stories. I love you. Thank you. Until next time, stay uncivilized.